I'm a big fan of vampire horror, and especially vampire comedy horror. Some of my favourites would include What We Do in the Shadows, The Lost Boys, and Fright Night, and I think those are pretty classic examples that poke fun at tropes of the subgenre. Today I'm going to be reviewing a new addition to this subgenre, and that film is Abigail. Not that Abigail, that's not a vampire movie. Of course, I mean this Abigail. Abigail was originally conceived as a remake of the 1936 Universal film, Dracula's Daughter. That version apparently centered on a group of kidnappers who abduct a band of young people, one of whom is the titular character. As you can imagine, chaos would then ensue. On top of this, Abigail seems to have garnered mixed, although generally positive-leaning reviews. For example, the film has a critic score of 83% and an audience score of 84% on Rotten Tomatoes at the time of this review. However, on Metacritic, the film has a Metascore of 62 out of 100 and a user score of 6.8 out of 10, both classified as generally favourable reviews. But is Abigail worth the hype? Let's find out. Without further ado, on with the review. The film opens with the titular character, Abigail, dancing to Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. She's played by Alisha Weir, an Irish actress also known for playing the titular role in Matilda the musical. However, seemingly unbeknownst to her, a group of criminals is watching her with plans to hold her for ransom. The group consists of Joey, played by Melissa Barrera, Frank, played by Dan Stevens, Rickles, played by Will Catlett, Sammy, played by Catherine Newton, Peter, played by Kevin Durand, and Dean, played by Angus Cloud. Rest in peace. I decided to list all of the gang members now just to get it out of the way, as this is a pretty character-heavy film. Abigail leaves the dance hall where she was practicing ballet, but a tracking device has been attached to her ride home. We get some nice character building when Dean tries to proposition Sammy romantically, but she blows him off, so he tries to turn on the radio to relieve the tension. It's a pretty human moment that elicits some empathy for him, a bad sign for him considering that this is a comedy horror. They break into the house and manage to kidnap Abigail after a struggle, but they scramble to leave after an unidentified person approaches the house. I like the use of subversion here, as it makes it appear that the robbers are the main threat in this film. While their actions are certainly awful, even without the vampire twist, Abigail is not what she seems. Our gang of hired criminals goes to a mansion where they meet their boss, Lambert, played by Giancarlo Esposito, or as I like to call him, Gus. No matter what role this guy's in, he's just Gus to me, so that's what I'll be calling him for most of this video. Peter and Joey restrain and blindfold Abigail in a room before Gus lays down some ground rules for them. No real names, no backstories, and minimal romantic conquests. Looking at you, Dean. Abigail should only be allowed to talk to Joey so she cannot connect the rest of the gang to this kidnapping. The reason for this scheme is that she's the daughter of an unnamed, very wealthy man. How encouraging! They also have to keep watch for 24 hours. To avoid the gang members being tracked, Lambert also confiscates their phones. I'm sure that this definitely isn't so they have no chance of calling for help or anything. Regardless, Dean is reluctant to give up his phone from the start.
Nobody's tracking me.
And there's our comic relief character. Here, the characters are actually given their nicknames, all based on different members of the Rat Pack. Rickles receives his nickname because his real-life counterpart was known for joking in his memoir that he never received an official membership card. Quite a dated reference if you ask me, but I guess it makes sense given Gus's assumed age. Despite all the rules that were just laid out, the group starts trying to guess each other's backstories. Frank is a police officer from Queens, Peter is from Quebec and became a muscle guy for a rich family following a troubled upbringing, Sammy is a rich girl turned hacker in it for the thrill, Rickles is a Marine sniper, and Dean is a getaway driver with loose wiring. Frank figures out that Joey is a recovering addict on top of being an ex-army medic, as she's been eating sweets the whole time, wears long sleeves, and has refused offers of alcohol. I can't lie, I found this exchange to be a bit cringy, as it feels a little far-fetched for me. I can believe that some people have good intuition, but I think the scene would have worked better if we had a few shots of Joey noticing things about each character beforehand. Joey goes to check on Abigail, who tries to appeal to her sympathy, asking her to remove the blindfold and handcuffs because they're too tight. Joey pulls up her mask and obliges. In return, Abigail engages in a personal conversation. We learn that Joey has a son named Caleb, and Abigail's father is emotionally neglectful. Abigail reveals that her father lost interest in her, and Joey seems to connect with this sentiment given her own complicated relationship with her son due to her addiction. Then the little terror gives some kind of cryptic warning.
I'm sorry about what's gonna happen to you.
This continues the subversion technique the film is using, as on a first-time watch, some viewers may assume that Abigail is referring to her father here. While that assumption may not be entirely wrong, we don't see his dangerous nature on screen much in this film. Joey asks Frank if he knows who Abigail's father is, and although he initially suggests she's being paranoid, Frank heads into the other room without his mask, assuming Abigail is still blindfolded. Startled to find out that this isn't the case, he threatens her with his gun, demanding to know who her father is.
Christophe Lazar?
I'm guessing that's not a name they want to hear. Frank packs to leave while relaying this information to the others, with Dean insisting that Christophe Lazar is simply an urban legend. However, Frank warns them that Lazar is a real and dangerous figure, a violent crime boss whose reputation apparently precedes him. The group resolves to stick to the original plan and then go off-grid once they've received their payments. Each member begins snooping around the mansion, and after bumping into each other, Joey and Rickles promise to look out for one another after admitting that neither of them trusts the other members. It's a solid start to a friendship, I guess. An attempt at a prank by Dean goes wrong, leading to Joey rejecting him once more. I'm not really sure what he was thinking. Scaring her would somehow change her mind about him? I think he's been smoking a bit too much. While looking around though, he finds an old painting of a girl who looks familiar alongside her father. In the kitchen, he hears some rustling around and begins to walk around aimlessly while doing the whole "hello, hello, who's there" routine. Yeah, it never seems to go well for people who do that in this type of movie, does it? Remember Shelley from Friday the 13th Part 3? Yeah. Cool effect on the head coming off though. Hearing Sammy's screams, Peter calls for help, prompting Joey, Rickles, and Frank to piece together a story about Lazar's supposed hitman, Valdez. Apparently, this guy is known for ripping people apart, even in situations that shouldn't be possible, such as when 3 targets are locked in a guarded room on the top floor of a building.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Considering what's just happened, I would be resigned to believe that whatever we're dealing with isn't human. Get with the program, people! Rickles attempts to leave the property but discovers that they're literally caged in with whatever threat is inside. Joey goes to ask Abigail if she's keeping a secret, and she tells her that Frank is Valdez.
A lie detector test determined that was a lie.
Although she thinks there's a hole in this story, Joey tells Rickles, and they decide to follow through with that teaming up plan. However, as soon as Joey turns her back on Rickles, his throat and part of his face are ripped off. While that sucks, her one true ally in this group is gone now. Who could have seen that coming? Alarmed, Joey confronts the rest of the group at gunpoint, still buying the whole Frank is Valdez story.
So now why am I in it? And you could have did it.
See, I did because you never apologized.
Taking offense to this, Frank orders Peter to shoot Abigail, but naturally, Joey doesn't let that happen, being a mother herself. As the group squabbles, Sammy notices Abigail slipping out of her handcuffs, but Frank shoots her before she is able to take a bite out of Peter. I'm a professional though, and everyone knows that bullets don't work on vampires. Bit slow this group, aren't they? So, the group all run back to where they were originally and start asking all the important questions.
What are we talking about, like an Anne Rice or a True Blood, Twilight? Very different kind of vampires.
I say that jokingly, but with the number of deviations in vampire lore, you'd have to choose which rules you're going to follow. Personally, I try to remember everything that I know about vampires in the religious sense, as that has genuine historical value. Peter is instructed with sharpening pool cues into stakes, and Sammy is tasked with getting garlic from the kitchen, all while Frank and Joey argue whether to kill Abigail or not. Frank insists that they should, but Joey argues that they can use Abigail as a bargaining chip with Christophe Lazar. I think Frank is wrong as Abigail is too smart for them, but Joey is wrong as Lazar doesn't exactly seem like a reasonable individual. But what can you expect from horror movie characters?
I got him.
Sammy, those are fucking onions.
The gang, or what's left of it, attempts to utilize the element of surprise by storming into Abigail's room, but finds it empty. They instead follow the sound of Swan Lake upstairs to find Abigail dancing to it, with Dean's very fake-looking decapitated corpse. It's giving Lestat. Anyways, Abigail finds the group's weapons useless, beating up Sammy, stabbing Peter with his crucifix, and using Frank's own stake on him. When Joey does her best to help the others recuperate, she remarks that the tranquilizer they used on Abigail earlier did actually work.
I checked her pulse and her breathing was slow and steady.
But I thought vampires weren't supposed to have a pulse. They're undead, as in having gone through the process of death. Ah well, I guess the rules do bend depending on what works for the plot. Joey has the bright idea to split up and find the vampiric ballerina, with whoever finds her first being tasked with alerting Joey via their walkie-talkies to come running with a syringe. That I will never understand in these movies. Having gone too deep into the house, Sammy ends up falling into a pool full of decomposing bodies, shrieking her head off. Meanwhile, Peter complains of a splinter, leading to the others initially not taking his cries for help seriously when he actually runs into Abigail. She dances through the house as she pursues him, reminiscent of Megan. The others manage to track Peter down, before it's too late, but Abigail turns her attentions to Frank instead. When Sammy attempts to restrain Abigail, she ends up being bitten, but Joey manages to tranquilize her while Peter detains her. They cage Angelina Ballerina and attempt to question her, with Frank trying to apologize for the whole kidnapping situation. Nice try, buddy. Abigail scoffs that she was behind the whole thing, Gus actually being one of her employees. She explains that Sammy, or Jessica, stole money from Lazar. Peter, or Terrence, similarly stole money from his crew, who are employed by Lazar. Frank, or Adam, was the one who arrested those 3 guys who ended up being killed by Abigail. And Joey, or Anna, was too high while operating on one of Lazar's business partners, and ended up killing him. It seems like Abigail is trying to gain her father's love through doing his dirty work. She promises that if one of them lets her out, she'll let 2 of them live, although they better make up their minds fast as this bargain has a time limit. While Peter goes to open the cage, Joey shoots him, and Frank keeps watch over Abigail while the others leave. She tells him that there's a secret door in the library open via a bookshelf, but when he refuses to let her out, she breaks free anyway. How manipulative! Joey saves Frank by letting the sunlight in, and they escape while Abigail regenerates. This is probably the coolest effect in the film in my opinion, although I obviously can't show too much of it thanks to YouTube's guidelines. That whole secret door thing doesn't exactly work out for Frank either. Sammy realizes that if she can find a power source, she can remove the locks around the house. Peter goes with her, but she ends up being mind-controlled by Abigail. Yeah, if Peter was your favourite character at this point, it's time to say goodbye. In an incredibly cheesy scene that once again reminds me of Megan, Abigail controls Sammy like a marionette, and the two dance to Blood and Tears by Danzig. Not that I've been making too many references to it in this review, but this movie has a pretty good soundtrack, and I would recommend it for that reason alone. However, this scene is interrupted when Joey and Frank arrive on the scene.
He's dead. She got him.
Very convincing, Abigail. Abigail, as Sammy, begins to chase the two through the house, but Joey uses a dinner tray to reflect the sunlight towards her. The bookshelf actually does end up opening then, leading to a room where Gus is watching CCTV footage of the group. Actually a vampire, Gus offers Frank a deal, as they knew each other before this whole kidnapping thing. He promises to turn Frank into an autonomous vampire, so they can kill Abigail and Lazar and take over their empire. Frank appears to agree, but he kills Gus once he's turned. The whole turning thing is quite disgusting here, with Frank vomiting out an enormous amount of blood. As I said, they do the whole dying thing to become undead. Abigail walks in and tries to attack Frank, but he gains the upper hand. While they're distracted, Joey turns off the gates but can't find her way out. Feeling defeated, she leaves her son a voicemail telling him she loves him, but Frank shows up to ruin it. There's always one, isn't there? The pair fight, with Frank obviously being the stronger of the two, vampire strength and all. He does wrestling moves on her, including throwing her into a table. Abigail catches Joey when Frank throws her off a balcony, promising to let her go if she helps her kill Frank, as she's too weak to do so by herself at that point. So our ballerina turned vampire and medic turned junkie turned reformed slayer tag team the crooked cop, but he ends up overpowering both of them once again. He ends up impaling Joey, and I have no idea how she comes back from this. After biting Abigail, Frank bites Joey, wanting to turn her into his puppet. While she seems to be following his instructions at first, she catches him off guard, and they end up defeating the rogue baby bats.
It's a long fucking time to learn how to do all the cool shit.
Oh, fuck.
Abigail gives Joey some words of advice, stating that to be a good mother, the least she can do is show up for her son. Just as she says this, Lazar walks in. He's played by Matthew Good, who I probably know best as Ozymandias in Zack Snyder's Watchmen, and Henry Talbot in Downton Abbey. He attempts to bite Joey, but Abigail shuts him up with this line.
She was here when you weren't.
Now that's how you clear a bitch.
Truth hurts, doesn't it? Lazar gives Joey permission to leave, and just as she drives away, Joey eats another lollipop. So, where to begin with Abigail? What are my thoughts all around? I think that the acting in this film is pretty good for what it's trying to achieve. Each actor clearly understands their character well, and they all bounce off each other remarkably well when it comes to the comedic aspects of the film. Every character provides something new to their dynamic, and the way each of them goes out does make sense. Dean is pretty scatterbrained, so it makes sense for them to be the first to go, aimlessly wandering around in a house that he doesn't know. Rickles puts a little too much faith in Joey as he turns away from her once he learns she's also ex-military, and he doesn't quite understand what he's up against. Peter is also a bit too trusting due to his simple nature, especially towards Sammy, as they have been bonding throughout the film. Lambert has a sort of managerial, although subordinate, role, so it makes sense for him to believe he has some kind of manipulative control over others, lulling him into a false sense of security. Finally, Frank acts as an all-guns-blazing kind of guy throughout the film, always on the offensive, so it makes sense for him to really overestimate his abilities when he becomes a vampire. Pride comes before a fall, after all. Joey doesn't die because she naturally builds a strong enough rapport with Abigail thanks to her motherly nature. Again, it makes sense for her to be the only one of the group who Abigail genuinely likes. The only exception to this is Sammy, as she was bitten due to her genuinely trying to do something selfless and help Frank, despite being characterized as a spoiled rich girl up until that point. I guess that does track in an ironic sense. While doing research for this video, I discovered that one of the most popular questions about the film was the subject of Lazar's identity. I would assume that he was Dracula, given the original intention for this film, and it would make sense considering his legendary status, implied age, and accumulated wealth. The character also doesn't shy away from implying it himself.
I've gone by many names over the countless years.
So yeah, that clears that up, at least for me. One major issue I had with the film is definitely nitpicking on my part, but as this series suggests, I really like vampires, so I'm gonna be nitpicky. Hence, I don't really like the lots of little teeth fang look. I also had this issue with Universal's Renfield, which I never ended up posting my review of thanks to YouTube's copyright system. In short, the two long canines look best. I can deal with an extra pair of canines, but no more. Another issue I had with the film is that it does come across like it's trying a little too hard to reach meme status, again, a bit like Megan. Sorry for the endless comparisons between the two, but I don't think the parallels are not without merit. The dancing does make a little more sense, as Alisha Weir is a trained dancer, which is apparently the whole reason the amount of dancing increased in the film. Still, it got a bit old for me, but I do think the film is funny on the whole. In terms of the film's future, there have been rumours circulating about a sequel, but if they don't do it soon, it may no longer be possible, as Alisha Weir will age differently from her on-screen counterpart. Overall, I think that Abigail is most certainly a fun and entertaining watch. It has a good balance of humour, engaging conflicts between the characters, and bucket loads of suitable gore for a vampire film. Not quite Evil Dead territory, but we might get there in the sequel if it does end up happening. I would definitely recommend this film to anyone who is a big fan of silly vampire horror. Well, that's all for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.
The blue and green ones are my favorite kind, but I'll eat the colored ones from time to time, cause polos is life, 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 polos is life. Sleep on